Good morning, everyone. My name is Karen King. I am the Community Affairs Liaison for the Office of New Haven Affairs. Our office hosts community breakfasts on the first Thursday of every month during the academic year from 8 to 9. While we are holding them virtually for now, it doesn't lessen the feeling of community. I feel at the very least when I see you all join us. So thank you for joining us this morning. We have a wonderful guest this morning, but first I'd like, as is my tradition, I'm going to make a few announcements before we introduce our speaker. And I am going to first make sure I turn off that sound. So a few announcements. So the first one is every year, the Yale Veterans Network partners with the National Veterans Council for Legal Redress, the City of New Haven, American Legion, and VFW to clean up the Long Wharf Memorial. And they are always looking for volunteers to help out. This year, they are hosting their cleanup on Saturday, November 6th from 9 to 11. I will post the contact details in the chat so that anyone who is interested can reach out, sign up. All materials are provided. They ask that you bring your energy to come out and help with this annual cleanup for this wonderful memorial. The Schwarzman Center, the Yale Schwarzman Center, was instrumental in helping to bring the Dance Theater of Harlem here to the Schubert. The Dance Theater of Harlem is currently engaged in programming at the Schubert. They are partnering with Yale to have a conversation. The artistic director will be joining us virtually, Virginia Johnson. This is an online event that you can register for in advance. It's taking place on Tuesday, November 9th. It says 4 to 5 a.m. While Dr. Williams may get up that early, we all don't engage that early. This is actually 4 to 5 p.m. I will put the date and the link in the chat so that you can join. I believe I described the Wyndham Campbell prizes at the last meeting, but the Wyndham Campbell prizes are awarded to writers every year. Each awardee gets $165,000 free and clear for them to use to continue to work on their craft and continue to do what they do best. Every year, the Wyndham Campbell prizes feature a festival. It's been virtual this year, but the Beinecke Library has made sure that we are still able to access the awardees this year. The next event, the next talk by one of the awardees is taking place on Wednesday, November 10th from noon to 1:30 p.m. And I encourage you to join. I will put the link in the chat as well. And finally, our office hosts the Yale President's Public Service Fellowship Program. This program places up to 35 Yale students throughout New Haven, working full-time for local nonprofits that are serving New Haven residents every summer. We are currently in the phase where we are inviting nonprofit organizations that are based in New Haven and serving New Haven residents to apply to host a fellow next summer. So those applications are due November 29th, and I will put the link to the application in the chat box. One more announcement, the New Haven Hiring Initiative is always shouting from the rooftops the availability of jobs here on campus, especially for New Haven residents. There are 605 positions posted in STARS, which is our proprietary portal for creating a profile, uploading resumes, and applying to jobs at Yale. The New Haven Hiring Initiative is currently in search of administrative assistants, financial assistance, clinical support, and medical assistance. So please help us to share the links that I will provide for you. One is to set up a profile on the STARS portal, and one is to get more information about the New Haven Hiring Initiative. So with that, we are going to welcome our this morning's speaker. This morning's featured speaker is Dr. Neftalie Williams. He's a sociologist and U.S. Provost postdoctoral scholar at the Annenberg School of Communication and Journalism. And Dr. Neftalie Williams investigates global issues of race, diversity, identity, and youth empowerment using the lens of skateboarding and action sports culture. His Beyond the Board study, in partnership with USC and the Skate Park Project, was featured in the New York Times and is the first national effort to study the impact skateboarding has on young people and their educational and career trajectories. As the first sports envoy for skateboarding for the US Department of State, Neftalie introduced the concept of skateboarding as a tool for cultural diplomacy in both theory and practice. Additionally, he co-founded the College Skateboarding Educational Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to creating scholarships for young skateboarders pursuing higher education, and serves on the boards of the Skate Park Project, formerly the Tony Hawk Foundation, Skateistan, and the McKinnon Center for Global Affairs. He also chairs the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee for USA Skateboarding. To further welcome Dr. Williams, I would like to invite Garth Ross, who is the director of the Yale Schwarzman Center, to join us. Hello, Garth.
Hello, Karen. Yes, my remarks will be brief and not very noticeable compared to what Neftalie will have to share, but I'm thrilled to be here again. I'm Garth Ross. I'm the inaugural executive director of the Yale Schwarzman Center, and really I'm just here to listen like all of you and here to support, and just to let you know that, Schwarzman Center, in our work with connecting campus and the public, the way we do our work is to put our friends in the community at the center of the work while we step out of the way. And that's what we've been doing with Neftalie as well, in the ways that he's been meeting and working with folks in the New Haven community, in the skateboard community. And Neftalie and I have worked together since for years now, since about 2014. We've worked on programs that support and spotlight skateboarding culture, first at the Kennedy Center in DC, then out in Los Angeles with UCLA and the Ford Amphitheater, and now here in New Haven. And I'm sure we've done other things that I'm forgetting. But with that, it's just such a pleasure, Karen, to be here with you, with all of the folks here at the Community Breakfast, and just glad that Neftalie has accepted our invitation, ours meaning Yale Schwarzman Center, to be our first visiting scholar in race, culture, and community. And that's what he has accepted. That's what he's done. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Neftalie.
Thank you very much, Garth. Thank you very much, everyone. It's thank you for getting up early to have breakfast and to be with me. And so I really appreciate it. And I'm just going to go ahead and get ready to get into my presentation, which is really going to focus on my research agenda with the work at Yale, and just give you an overview of how I arrived and what I'll be bringing to the community in terms of having conversations. So I'm going to go ahead and see if I'm in charge of being able to share my screen. So let's go here. All right, can everyone see it okay? Okay, perfect. So as I said, good morning, I'm Dr. Williams. I'm excited to be with you today and to present my talk, Forward Motion, Aligning Race, Culture, and Community Through Scholarship and Skateboarding. While that's a bit of a lengthy title, I promise to give it to you in little bite-sized bits because it's actually, since it's early in the morning, but I really want to just be able to talk to you about my research agenda, how it fits into Yale's and the Schwarzman Center's directives. So I'll really begin it simply. Does anyone have any idea, show of hands, what connects these images of Emmanuel Macron and our young people behind them? The Oscar-winning documentary, Virgil Abloh from Louis Vuitton, and an amazing display of a jazz band on the West Coast. Show of hands. Okay. Garth, your hand doesn't count, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to skip that. So the answer is skateboarding and action sports culture. And whether jamming and skating with jazz and hip hop, or Virgil Abloh paying homage to his time as a skateboarder through design, or the Oscar-winning skateboarding documentary on the lives of young skaters in Afghanistan, or Emmanuel Macron simply visiting the young Black folks who are with us who are skaters from Ghana. Either way, skateboarding has been intimately connected to issues of sport and popular culture, music, media, design, and activism, which brings me directly to my research topic. Excuse me for one second. Now, what I will show you is first, as I said skateboarding action sports, but the first thing we're going to do is define action sports, because most people are saying, hey, I know skateboarding, but don't really know like what does this thing is. So really, just to give you a rough background, action sports are kind of loosely defined as individual activities with an ethos of DIY, which is do it yourself, which particularly that's something that communities of color have known about for a long time, but that is called the DIY ethos, and that type of learning aesthetic. Generally, there's limited emphasis on competition and more on individual success. Those sports they include, but they're not limited to skateboarding, surfing, snowboarding, parkour, rock climbing, and BMX. They're really based on individual power and control and being the person that you want to be, in particular for me, the person that you want to be while you're on your board and the community that you're part of. Now, speaking of power, what I saw in my early days, in my early professional career, looking at skateboarding was that, first of all, I saw that there were people of color in front of and behind the lens. And that is something that we as communities of color do not get to see that often. And that has been embedded in the culture since day one. If we take a look at that image to the left at the top is from a 1981 issue, Travels with the Ridge with Brian Ridgway. It was one of the first Black people that I saw in skateboarding magazines. And the very first issue of Trend World Skateboarding, there are people who look like me, similar glasses, maybe mine are a tiny bit smaller, but seeing that and knowing that our people were there and that they were present. And that was a big change and big difference than even this recent photo of the NFL sideline, which we see on the right. I was a sponsored skateboarder, and I was really inspired because I saw many people of color in skateboarding behind and in front of the lens, that I myself had written an article about Black skateboarders when I was still kind of a teenager and thinking about my experience, the experiences of my friends. And that really prompted me to focus on becoming a journalist and being a photographer. However, what I really wanted to do was see, like, how could I make more change? And the more change came with getting my PhD and really focusing on a research agenda that utilizes what I saw in skateboarding action sports culture as a lens to engage issues of race, gender, power, and diversity, and most importantly, to create social change. Now, for those of you who don't know, I know she listed it quickly, but I began my career at USC Annenberg, and I earned my bachelor's in communication, my master's in public diplomacy, and I worked closely with the Annenberg Institute of Sports, Media, and Society and the Center for Public Diplomacy. While I was studying, what I thought was, how could I utilize my interest as a skateboarder and being positioned as a professional within the actual industry, really to create change on a personal level and in a community level? And the answer for me was to pursue my PhD, to actually move beyond just being a practitioner, but into a scholar. In preparing for my PhD, what I saw was that despite the fact that there were Black, Indigenous, and people of color, men and women who had contributed to skateboarding, who were on the covers, as we see here from this magazine from September 1990, up to today with Samaria Brevard on the right, is that even though we've been there the entire time, that history was rarely seen in academia, it was definitely not seen in the public sphere, and it was missing on a deeper level. And it also was something where I saw a unique blend of allyship that was present in skateboarding culture that I rarely saw modeled in other sports. I'm sure that's something we can all think about as I say that. And the connection between communities is something that really wasn't being documented. So for me, it presented an opportunity to highlight the way that people of color have had power and been present and guided this sport that we know is actually now an Olympic level sport, but that we were all there the entire time. And so those missing histories, I actually just want to pause for a second and think about when the last time, other than the new things that are going on in New Haven, had you really thought of the narrative of people of color, particularly Black people, being presented with skateboarding and action sports culture? Show of hands, is that something that that people see every day? I see no hands, so I'm going to go ahead and let that be. So for me, it was really, how do I actually take this history that we all have collectively together and place that in a new context? So with that, that is where I developed my PhD, Color in the Lines, the Power and Racial Politics of US Skateboarding Culture. Now, not to move too academic, but I'll just ask you, or just give you a little bit. My primary research question was, what were the experiences of key African-American and people of color in elite skateboarding culture? And what that breaks down to is, how was everyone living? What was it like being out there when you actually don't see yourself on ESPN every weekend, or images of Black and brown people are not constantly placed in the zeitgeist through popular media? And that project asked three major questions. What were their experiences and how they developed strategies to navigate power? And how might they have acted as agents of change in skateboarding culture as a whole? Now, simple things, I'll just talk a little bit about methods. Methods was just looking at media, actual niche media in skateboarding. And as you see, just from here, there are so many people of color who are on the covers of the magazines from the 1970s going forward. During that research, I did media analysis of the covers and interviewed 50 different culture intermediaries in skateboarding culture from the 1960s to the present day. So basically, I interviewed as many people as possible to get a broad sample. And particularly, there was a question that people had asked early, which, why did you not just focus on African-American people? And the reason I did that was because skateboarding was one of the spots in which I got to see so many different people from backgrounds being together. So it didn't make any sense to actually sort of slice people out, because what's special in the skateboarding culture was them being together. And what we don't have is more models of actually what that looks like. That's actually the issues that we have now. Now, of course, this just a small scholar bit, but just going, this work is in conversation with previous scholarship from W.E.B. Du Bois, Stuart Hall, particularly at Yale, Elijah Anderson, in his use and thinking about the Black body in white space and what that experience is like. Also, Patricia Hill Collins and Kimberly Crenshaw thinking through critical race theory, and Manuel Castells thinking about communication theory, and the method is in nodes of communication. I worked with some feminist sports scholars, Belinda Wheaton and Holly Thorpe and Becky Beal, who are the preeminent scholars in action sports, particularly in feminist scholarship and action sports. And then I looked to other scholars, Ben Carrington, Kevin Hilton, David Wiggins, who'd been discussing race in popular sports, but hadn't been discussing it in action sports. Now, to make it easy, just to synthesize the findings of the work, is just to say that what I saw was that elite skaters of color participated in skateboarding culture as cultural intermediaries. And that being, they are the key people who drive the culture, if we use Bordeaux's framing of cultural intermediaries. And the key thing was that it was real representation and not tokenism. People were on the cover because they deserved to be on the cover, because they were the ones who were driving the culture, and that they contributed to skateboarding in ways which addressed racism and created social change. They also created new models of allyship. Now I'm going to pause for a second and just give us a moment to take a look at some of these images. One from on the right, Daewon Song, Asian American skater who was Skater of the Year. In this image to the left, Mike McGill over one of the first Black pro skaters during the 80s, Steve Stedham. Both of those members on the same most elite skateboarding team at the time, clearly showing that we were present and that we were involved in the media and that we were forming this culture. Or even the decks that you see on the bottom of Stevie Williams and Josh Kalis, right close by in Philadelphia, and that their relationship together and their building of both the brand and the building of skateboarding in Philadelphia together. And then we look to the right, there's a young Mariah Doran, Leo Baker, and Vanessa Torres, again, females and non-binary folks who are together building the culture from every different background. And so you might think, well, if this was all here, Neftalie, like, why did you need to do it? Well, the answer to that is none of the scholarship that had been written had included people of color. So in doing this, they basically said that when they saw people of color on the covers of magazines, that was tokenism. And that it was probably, there was no way that people of color could have had power and been able to influence the culture. And if there was a way, they couldn't imagine what it might be. So my work was to go back and actually talk to the people who were there, who were the ones who designed the magazines, were founders of the magazines, worked together and actually showed what those new models of allyship that we all want to have in our lives, what it looked like in skateboarding culture in the, as we'd say, in this little small sphere that doesn't get much coverage and is also often maligned. They were doing the things that we wish everyone else was doing. So really gaining a deep understanding of how this affected people of color on the elite level provided the basis of what I'm going to talk about right now, which was our study on the lives of everyday young people and how that they experience lives and address issues of power. My belief was that understanding those issues could help us build a more inclusive environment for the young people in academia and in cultural institutions. And that led us to our most recent research. Now, this is our USC and Tony Hawk Foundation, now known as the Skate Park Project, skate study. That was developed with the Paliya Center at the Rossier School. And the research examined skaters' perceptions of the benefits of skateboarding, skateboarding culture, their interpretation of the skateboarder identity, and really getting at the obstacles and opportunities that the young BIPOC and non-BIPOC skaters face in life and in their career and academic trajectories. What we saw was this report would be a bridge between the skate and non-skateboarding communities. And in that study, we asked the research questions: how does the skateboarding identity affect the way skaters interact with each other and with society? And what challenges do skateboarders face as individuals and part of a skate community? And then, as we'd say in New Haven, as part of that larger community, right? And as you see, just some of the images here, just our current images of like Brianna King from the new issue of Vogue, female of color, it's skateboarder, her careers and the ways that she uses skateboarding as a way to create change. And so she's actually involved in our newest study. Now, in the Tony Hawk Foundation study with USC, our key research findings were that it improved mental health, it enhanced development of community across racial, gender, and generational lines. And just to touch on that a tiny bit, what we saw in cross-generational lines was that the skate park was one of the only ways in which young people and those who are not so young got to actually share information, share experience, and build the culture together. And whereas traditionally, if you say, let's say the pickup basketball court, that the tennis court or basketball court, traditionally, those who are in their 50s play with people in their 50s. They don't play with 10-year-olds. They don't play with 14-year-olds. And what we see in skateboarding is that is not the case. It's actually the intergenerational transfer of wealth, intergenerational transformation of informational wealth. And what that is exactly what we want to be happening with our young people. For our oldest to be able to spend time with our youngest, or for them to see themselves reflected in each other and to inspire and really create those synergies. And that's without also looking at sort of gender and racial lines. And it also improved mental health. And when we look at that is, of course, this was really before we got to where we are in COVID right now, where we actually know how important it is for all of us to be together and to be outside, yet being able to social distance. So skateboarding really provided that way for young people to relieve the stress that they were experiencing during the day. Now, the most important key finding for me is I was using a critical framework while we're doing this research. And I was using critical race theory and thinking through that the experiences of young people and how they face and deal with power and race and racism in their lives. And so the key finding was that the skateboarding identity was also a defense to racism. Now, the finding is skaters of color, particularly Black males, felt that they were judged less harshly and seen as less of a threat from non-skateboarding, non-people of color. Now, for me, this is astounding because, of course, first of all, I'm a Black scholar who grew up living this life. And I'm looking for as many ways as possible for people of color's lives to be valued and to feel safe. That's our number one priority, is how do we take care of our young people? So the fact that skateboarding was making them feel like they were not judged so harshly and that people were not viewing them as a threat was, I mean, my alarms are going off, because that is a profound finding, because we need as many ways as possible for our young people to feel safe and feel like they are part of the community that they're at, to feel like people are not going to perceive them as a threat or as troublemakers or, you know, or worse. You know, while there may be no particular love for skateboarders, right? You know, it could just be the fact that when they're riding their skateboards, that people see them as human as opposed to being a threat. Well, that's still important to me. When Black life is under threat, any way that we can create a seed of humanity and for people to see themselves in the other is really critically important. So while that might seem like, oh, there is a question people have asked saying, you know, well, why do they view them this way? Well, maybe it's just that they see them as young skaters and maybe they were skaters, or maybe their cousins, nieces, and nephews were skaters, or maybe again, they don't care about them being skateboarders. They don't like skateboarders, but they don't like skateboarders a little less than they do viewing them as a threat going through their neighborhood. And I'm concerned with Black and brown people making it home. And so if this is what it takes to align them, that they happen to be riding a skateboard, then that's, for me, critically important. Now, it also allows us to think deeply about the role of skate parks in creating safe, inclusive spaces for people to gain knowledge and shared knowledge of each other. Because the other finding in the research was that the skate park was the place that everyone from every background was coming together to share, learn, and enjoy the space and learn how to enjoy each other. And I don't know about you, but there's not that many spaces in people's lives under normal circumstances where everyone comes together to use the same space, regardless of racial background, socioeconomic, gender, or any of the things that separate us. So the skate park has become the space, and the research has shown that. Now, of course, I was very excited, you know, but what was really incredible was the way that the narrative on the research shifted over time. And we're going to go over these slides, but really to say, originally people were excited about the study because they really believed that there was no need to focus on race and the implications for communities of color. And I say that by, in February of 2020, the LA Times article said, skateboarding improves mental health, helps build diverse relationships. That's kind of the softball approach. And I was really saying, hey, this is critical in understanding how we can keep young Black and brown people safe, and how communities of color can both see new strategies and wish to develop allyship. Now, I really fought hard to make sure that that was included in the study, and that finding. And I will tell you, people thought maybe we were in a post-racial world and we didn't need to talk about race anymore. Maybe we just needed to talk about everything is fine and that things are, everyone is together. And while that's true, in the research that we saw, it was really important for me to single out why we were together and identify the threats that young Black and brown people were facing. When I fought for that within the study, what we saw was the difference in coverage after the murder of George Floyd. I had told the reporters, listen, we really need to think about race and what skateboarding may do for improving the lives of people of color. And again, as I said in February, it was sort of a minor detail that reporters thought. But after the murder of George Floyd, the New York Times piece, they literally called and said, we get it now. We understand why you were saying that and why it was important. And we just weren't seeing that we needed more ways to combat racism and to take care of the lives of Black and brown people. So thankfully, of course, they've come on board, and so many people have come on board. It's just sad that what it took was, was the murder of George Floyd to push everyone in that direction. But we were here, and even though people think, right now this seems very simple, at the time it really was, it was instrumental in changing that narrative. People began to understand what the importance of how skateboarding might be used for anti-racist activities, DEI initiatives, and in creating a more inclusive world for young people. And, this continued beyond the US, and people were talking about it in publications around the world. We were being interviewed to talk about that. And it actually became the new framework to think about ways to think about race in sport and skateboarding in sport, all prior to the Olympics. So that has really informed these larger conversations and about the power of individuals to develop and support communities through skateboarding. Now, real simple, while I only focused on those two previous studies, it really has been a dynamic time for future research and community endeavors. There's new narratives around skateboarding action sports because of the research that we did, and also because of the work that was done here in New Haven. As we saw, what Skate Park in New Haven aims to bring community together, all of these things have led up to this moment right now where communities are able to access and think about what skateboarding might mean and how it might contribute to creating more inclusive spaces and reframing what skateboarding and skateboarding culture may be able to do, both linking communities, the academic community, and as cultural institutions. This op-ed here was the most refreshing sport at the Tokyo Olympics was skateboarding. So the fact that we are having these deep discussions and creating space and change in New Haven speaks to the broader zeitgeist. Everyone is thinking about where skateboarding sits and how it brings everyone together. And they're being reminded that we need more models of what it looks like to actually have allyship and to have young people have power in their lives, and for people across generations to understand, respect, and reflect on those lives and how they want to see them move forward in a positive way. So I will let it stand there and just go to our next. It's time for your questions, and I'll stop this, but hope that gave you a little bit of insight into where my research fits and what we're doing here at the Schwarzman Center and in New Haven.
Thank you so much, Dr. Williams.
No problem.
I have now given everyone the ability to unmute themselves so that you can ask questions by either raising your hands, taking advantage of a quiet moment to start your question, or you can put your question in the chat. Ms. Shaw, I'm going to call on you to go first.
Okay. Neftalie, you gave a presentation, God, I don't even remember who the group was, a few months ago with the guy from the city traffic director, and whose name I cannot not remember right now, and he'd get me on that. But here's my thing. You didn't give a presentation that gave us all this kind of information. You were just telling us, okay, we've identified a temporary spot. And of course, when we were told what it was, I was aghast. And the only reason was it was close to the railroad station. It bothered me that there would be so much traffic that our little Black and brown kids were going to be run over, because we have an awful lot of problems now with hit and run. So that was my negative to the skate park, because I was very happy when when I heard that that it was in another area of the city, and it's close. There's not an awful lot of traffic, so that these children do have space to, because they don't look when they're crossing streets and stuff like that. And so that, of course, was my main concern with the location of the park. And then you also talked about what was it? The generational lines and how people or kids of all of all races and cultures get together. But that's because they start this when they're young, when they have not been I don't know, that when they've not been separated by institutional bias that that happens, especially when it's a group, it's a group sport. These kids are allowed to develop themselves. They see someone else who's doing something great and they go, oh, wow, let me see that. Let me do that. I mean, so it gives them an opportunity to really see what they can do without someone telling them that they can't. Sorry, it was long, but you gave a lot of information.
No problem, no problem. So I'm what I will just say to them. One, I don't believe that presentation was me. I believe that was Jay and Steve, but who are part of our team at Yale Schwarzman, who are really responsible for bringing the bowl and getting that done, and for getting the park done. So so I wasn't on that, but I know, of course I was there in spirits, because they are the ones who've been driving this. But what I did want to add is what I think you were touching on for a moment was a little bit about talking about, hey, when they're young, when people are young, that they really are open and free. But what I also like to add to that is, particularly driven globally through the pandemic, people from all ages have been coming to skateboarding, because the first thing that is people were looking for ways to exercise when they couldn't be with their rec leagues, or they couldn't be in these other areas where they played team sports or pickleball on the weekend or softball or football. They were unable to do those things. And so right now, the actual largest demographic in new skateboarding is actually 30 plus. So what we see is like the same things will happen, is that using that space will still continue that ways of knowing and understanding people that you might not normally be concerned with, or hanging out with, or spending time with. And so actually, to your point, it's actually very important that the more we have those skate parks, because it isn't just for the children. While we talk about them sometimes in youth terms, but anyone who's on this call can become a skateboarder. And what sport do you know where any of you could start at the moment's notice, where no one says, I'm sorry, ma'am or sir, or for our gender non-binary folks, we don't allow you, or you're too old, or you don't have this, or you're not cool enough. That is what actually makes skateboarding special. And that's the reason we should build more skate parks, because what you will see is that you will see more people who look like you, regardless of what your age or background is. So I really back what you're saying, is that yes, the skate park really is an important place, and the creation of that has been fantastic. So so thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, even watching the kids skateboard in the street, I go, okay, whatever.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
So,
Thank you so much for that. Thank you.
sure thing.
Any other questions?
Well, there's a great question in
Oh.
the chat. This is for actually Dr. Williams, Garth, Steve, Steve Roberts, if you want to chime in. The question from Chris is, how can we donate to get more of our kids into skateboarding in New Haven?
Oh, well, that is the first thing, is really supporting Jay and Steve with Push to Start. And again, my job has always been to go and support to support the initiatives that are already going on. And Jay and Steve and the work getting the Scantlebury Park done and working with Garth, all of that work has been instrumental and monumental. So following Push to Start is really the way to go. And you'll see them on Instagram, and in particular, Steve and I were just having a talk about what his next moves will be, sort of scaling up. So if you're really interested in getting that done and helping support, you really should support Push to Start, and Acidwood, and as well, that's right there in New Haven. Oh, sorry. Yes, Steve Roberts. I apologize for not saying Steve's last name. Sorry. Oh, Doug, I see Doug is on. Is that, yes, Doug has a question.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Really
Yeah,
appreciate your conversation this morning, and
No problem.
wondering how the Olympics has
Steve.
kickstarted, jump-started, or inserted, steroids into the conversation about, when is LA Olympics, and like 10 years away, right?
So
how-
yes, 2020, it'll be 2028. So time is ticking by fast. So there's a lot to discuss there. Yes.
Yeah. So how has that changed your conversations globally, locally, and how does that also enhance the sport of skateboard as a potential profession or whatever for folks? Thank you.
No, thank you very much. So thank you for that question. And it has really jump-started the conversation across lines. To put it simply, there are some places and some institutions who only support recognized sports. Skateboarding is not a thing to them until it became an Olympic sport. And then that becomes something where their job is to make Olympians, right? I would say it, a little flippantly, but it is the job of any school that has, their amateur athletes or their sports teams. They're now thinking like, wait a minute, so we can get Olympic medals in skateboarding. How do we need to think about and support young skateboarders and get them to come to our school? Right. In particular, it is what is it at Yale to have Olympians and what is in schools that have an Olympic tradition. So now they're having that conversation. It's also called on a global scale, it's called countries to rethink what it is that they want to be famous for. And I've worked in Brazil. I've worked in Brazil for a long time, and I remember having the initial conversations with the representatives from the city of Sao Paulo, and they were really excited about their football or soccer legacy. And one of the conversations was, did you know that you already had world-class skateboarders who were getting medals all over the world? And the answer was no, they had no idea. They were so concerned with their previous narratives of sport of like, we play soccer, we play football, that is what we do. Until they realized, wow, we have all of these young people as ambassadors that are really pushing Brazil to a new generation. And so we actually worked on a really big article with their version of Time magazine called Epoca. And they really were diving into their own history where they did not know because they were not recognizing their young people. Now, with Raíssa Leal coming in third and getting a bronze medal at the Olympics, coming in second at the Olympics in the women's park division, in the women's street, there's now been a real push in Brazil where they've been recognizing particularly their young women, and that skateboarding for them is now a new way that they're starting to identify themselves. But I can tell you, I had those conversations in 2014 where they were not thinking about that. But since then, that whole thing has progressed. And now with the Olympics, they're sort of seeing, they're reaping the benefits, even though they might not have really been functioning to support skaters up until, maybe 2017, 2018. This has really been an explosion now that there's been so many Olympians that are from Brazil. And I've worked and talked to them in the Philippines and in Cambodia and in other countries. They're all getting excited to say, here is something officially recognized. We did not know that there was no correct body type, that you didn't have to be 6 foot 5 inches tall, or you needed to be thin or heavy, or whatever the normal attributes that people look for to go, need that body, you can play the sport. What it allows is for them to actually recognize that all of their young people have the potential to be Olympians, and that they just have the potential to be athletes in their own bodies and in their own skin. And then you get in those deeper things where they start to recognize, wait a minute, so let's get this straight. They could also be Olympians, but they can also be happy in their own bodies. And we don't need to push them to be anything else. Well, that's a really, really powerful spot for any country, for any state, in any institution to be able to think about what a future looks like where you can really celebrate the individual themselves.
Thank you. Steve Roberts has a question.
Steve Roberts is here, the one in charge of Push to Start, who's done all the good work on the ground. So I'm just excited to see that. Say thank you. Thank you for joining us, Steve. He has done all of the work.
I will say all of the work. Jay is, the other half of the dynamic duo. I don't have a question. I have more of a comment. First of all, I want to say thank you for, your work and like inspiring the next generation of Black and brown skateboarders. I can give a little bit more context. I've been skateboarding for 17 years. I started when I was 13. And I remember when I was about 15 or 16, my mom started letting me skate downtown by myself. And that's when I met the man who owned our local skate shop, Channel 1, Luke Cox. He was actually, after getting to know him, I found out he was from my neighborhood. So a Black man from my neighborhood happened to own the first skate shop in New Haven, the best skate shop in New Haven, one that won't be imitated. And I'll say I can really speak to kind of seeing yourself in skateboarding, because not only was Channel 1 a skate shops, Channel 1 was a hub of the hip hop community. And skateboarding and hip hop were really kind of parallel. There's some crossover, but I tell people like skateboarding sessions operate like hip hop cyphers, and then they like, you know, and then if certain people get it, certain people don't. But like that kind of improvisational nature where it's like you also get some the cooperation and the and a little bit of competition. It's always like been an interesting dynamic to me. And I'll say like, you know, this stuff has been happening. You know, Beinecke Library has been skated for 20 years. And I laugh and joke and tell people like there's a scene in Iron Man where Tony Hawk has a digital display of the World's Fair. And he's like throwing different, like he gets rid of like trash cans, trees. And that's almost how like skaters around New Haven see Yale, where it's not like, you know, Beinecke Library has this, you know, historic collection of his old books or something, like, you know, it's the ledges, it's the stair set, it's the drop, it's, you know, the pyramid that everyone has wanted to skate for 20, 25 years, but has been too scared to. And I guess like what, for me, like as kind of Yale influences the city and changes the city, it's almost like, dang, like, you know, I don't have the power to, I don't have any say-so over this, but like, you know, if a new ledge happens to pop up, if a new stair set happens to pop up, if a new, you know, if something new happens to pop up that I can skate, it's almost a way to help deal with it. But yeah, that's really all I had to say. Yeah, and I'm glad to be on this call with all y'all wonderful folks this morning. Oh, and last thing, as you know, as proof that, you know, anyone can skateboard, I'll say I had the pleasure of giving the Schwarzman Center's Director of Communication, Maurice, a skateboarding lesson while Dr. Williams was in New Haven. So, you know, and my compliments to Maurice. He's actually a very natural skateboarder and picked it up very quickly. And I hope to see him at some more Push to Start lessons. But yeah, I'll turn the floor over to y'all.
Amazing. I want to just touch on a couple of things that you just brought up too. Is for those who don't know what Steve was really talking about is how skateboarding gives you a new lens to see and appreciate the city and appreciate urban space in a way that you don't have until you have skateboarding eyes, until you have that lens. And Maurice just getting started in skating, him being a natural skater, he will feel that and see that as he skates more. And that's a really intimate relationship that skateboarders have with the city that a traditional pedestrian doesn't feel it in the exact same ways. And then you also were just talking a little bit about the new designs of what happens in the city and being able to take advantage of that. And in knowing that your history was in Channel One, right? You were a young Black skater, and then you got to know a little bit more. That's the intergenerational talk of understanding, like there were Black skaters who were before you in that mixture of hip hop culture. And that's one of the important things that people sometimes don't understand or until it's brought to light, is that, again, Black and brown communities have built this culture. And by allowing skateboarding to flourish in any space, it's actually an opportunity to reconnect with that space in those histories that have been previously missing. And to Doug's question too, what does the Olympics allow? For me, the Olympics also allows us to have this discussion where people might see skateboarding in the Olympics and think, oh, it's now grown to that space, but I want to focus, and our work at Yale Schwarzman with Jay and Steve and Maurice and the whole team is really to get people to recognize themselves and to know that they're part of that narrative. It's only in the Olympics because we all participated. But again, we need more models and more stories and more ways of knowing that there has been allyship and what that looks like, and that there's been space for people of color to have their whole individual identities recognized. And that is the difference between when we talk about what happens to skateboarding culture and the fact that, you know, in traditional sports, Colin Kaepernick still does not have a job, right? He still does not have a job because the league did not want to recognize his identity. And so they wanted the labor without the person. And so what we are able to do that's specifically important for communities of color in skateboarding is that we're able to recognize the whole person. We want them participating because everyone brings something to the collective. And that is what's different. It's not about just the labor. It's about who you are. We all do the same tricks. We have the same vocabulary, but it's what we bring to that. It's what special is. It could just be the way you cuff your pants just looks right, and that will inspire someone else. And that is the difference between traditional sports and the action sports spaces. There are more ways for people to be inspired and to see themselves reflected. That is what we need as communities of color, is we are fighting all of these major institutions, the NFL, MLB, like we've done this, we've been here, we are here, we are alive, and we are powerful, and you need to listen to us. They do not have to listen to us. I sit on panels with sports scholars who've been in the game for 40, 50 years, and they all look and go, so let me get this straight. You could be Colin Kaepernick and have the best-selling pro model skateboard because you actually get to be yourself, because people actually value and recognize you for being you, be it you wanting to be a quiet, reflective person, or you being an activist, or you just being just an athlete, like that's just how you get down. You get to do that in skateboarding. Wow, there's a lot of lessons for us to learn over here in traditional sports because we don't own any of these teams. Yet in skateboarding, there's the opportunity for people to actually own the teams, to be the coach and the owner, and make sure that everyone who comes up under you is recognized. And that's just the thing that we're looking for in Black and brown lives. So I mean, to me, I'm on panels with these folks, and I'm saying, why are we beating our heads and giving our children to these people? They don't care. They haven't cared. Why? Yet we're having conversations where we're like, oh, let's not build skate parks, or that's for white people, or that's for other people. And when I look at what we have, what are our options, right? Like, we're literally funneling them and telling young people, this is the dream, this is the thing you have. But do not forget that I'm also in academia, and I am fighting in the academic institutions to make sure that there is a space for these young people as they go to school, because it should not be a conversation of, oh, you can only be an athlete like a pro skateboarder. No, all those things that you love about skateboarding, that space for your identity to be recognized, be a videographer, an entrepreneur, an artist, or just the athlete, all of those things are what we teach in the institution. That is why we have the academy. So it is my job in the academy to really push them to recognize that they need to create space for the young people, because I was them and I know what it's like to teach and have a teacher who knows where you come from and what your background is, and then make that space. So it's not just like, well, I want people to build skate parks. It's that the institutions must also be responsible and allow young people to see themselves. And in the community, making sure that we are not creating barriers for our young people to be recognized and funneling them into these systems that we're trying to dismantle in the first place. So, that's just a little bit of how I'm feeling on it.
Thank you, Dr. Williams.
No
I know we have a hard stop at 9, but there's a great question in the chat that I hope you can at least give an answer to. One, Dottie asks, how do you help someone with a disability get into skateboarding? Oh, you're on mute right now.
Sorry about that. One, it depends on what the disability is, but we are actually working to make sure that skateboarding is in the Paralympics for 2028. So that's a broad answer to what, there's lots of disabilities, and we are focused on that. There are skaters who are blind, skaters without limbs. That's actually been in skateboarding for quite a long time. Those who don't have the use of their lower extremities, who are pro skaters. So while they're not I didn't put that in today's presentation because that was a little bit just focused on the research focus, but all of those things are being addressed, and the skaters have been doing forever, because that's what happens when you're operating in a space, as we know, of marginalization. Well, the entire sport is marginalized. So everybody, that's why people flock to it and come to it, because there is a space that even if you have disability, that you can still be a skateboarder. Again, the skaters that we're seeing now. Again, there's a young skater who's blind, who has been skating and wants to develop a school for the blind and those without the use of their extremities. But that's been happening in skateboarding now for roughly since the 90s. So you might not see it. That might not be right where you're at in your neighborhood this particular moment, but trust me, you will see it, especially as we get into 2028.
Thank you for that. Well, we are going to conclude. I took the liberty, Dr. Williams, of putting in your
No problem.
email address to share.
Yes, of
1
course.
hour does not cover it. I'm sure people have a lot of questions. They want to connect more with your passion and your expertise. And I know as an ambassador here at Schwarzman, you'd be happy to connect.
I would. And I know that Abner has a question. He hasn't said anything, but I know and I can feel it. So obviously, Abner, we're going to have this conversation later. So please feel free to email me and through everyone. So I will talk to you all soon. Thank you very much for tuning in.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you next month. Thanks again, Dr. Williams.
Bye.